Ole Miss's chances for the 2025 college football playoffs will surprise you.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast around. I'm Steven Willis, your host, a 10-year veteran member of the national media and a former Ole Miss staff member. On today's show, we dive into the latest ESPN Football Power Index rankings, which gave Ole Miss the 12th best odds to reach the college football playoff in 2025, a ranking that might even surprise Rebel fans after losing Jaxson, Dart, Trey Harris, Walter Nolan, Trey Amos. Conventional wisdom says the Rebels should take a step back, but Lane Kiffin's roster building wizardry tells a different story. We start off breaking down the underlying metrics, returning production, coaching continuity, and transfer additions, and explain why the analytics models are so still bullish on the Ole Miss Rebels. Next, we meet the next wave, including Austin Simmons at quarterback and the linebacker Suntarine Perkins, poised to become national names in 2025. Finally, we talk about a sold-out Vaught-Hemingway Stadium. Season tickets are gone again, making game day access tougher than ever. Great for Oxford, but what about road trippers that have a hard time getting a ticket now? So let's talk watch parties and stuff like that. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. So we talked a little bit last week about the football power index thing that came out, but one of the things that we kind of glossed over about, and I wanted to go back to, is the fact that Ole Miss has very high odds to reach the college football playoff. In fact, they have the 12th best odds in the entire country, right around where the LSU Tigers are. They actually have higher odds to make the playoff than LSU, even though LSU is higher ranked in the FPI than Ole Miss. That's likely because Ole Miss is hosting the Tigers at the end of September in what will be the game of games, essentially, with Ole Miss football. Should be really interesting to see how Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss handles the LSU Tigers in Oxford. Lane Kiffin has not lost to LSU in Oxford. But this is another example of a team metric-based with the FPI rankings, and we'll get into the S&P Plus in a little bit. They're bullish on the Ole Miss Rebels to make the college football playoff. They're right on the edge of making the playoffs. They have the 12th best probability to make it into the field. That is not quite good enough to get there because G5s and conference winners and stuff like that, they may be on the outside looking in, but they're right there in the conversation. This is a season to where Ole Miss football can take a step forward. We talk pretty much all the time of how this year could be a T. Martin type experience for the Ole Miss Rebels. I'm not talking national championship, although that's what T did at Tennessee. I'm talking about having the generational players graduate and then the next year make it to where the generational players could never get to. I think this team has all of the talent necessary, and we'll talk about that in the next segment, to make the college football playoff and also make a name for themselves in the college football playoff. But looking at these metrics, the reason metrics are based on Ole Miss and they're based so high, the S&P Plus, the FPI, no matter what the computer model is, they are going to rank Ole Miss high because Ole Miss has recruited well in the transfer portal and period over the last 3 years, which means they have roster production that is pretty high up. The S&P Plus and the FPI use parts of what the other players did at their former schools at the new schools. So Ole Miss gets a boost doing that. Ole Miss plays in the Southeastern Conference, which means you're going to have one of the toughest schedules and the toughest roads to get to the playoffs, period. But Ole Miss is third since Lane Kiffin has been at Ole Miss in the Southeastern Conference, behind Alabama and Georgia. That is factored in the algorithm for these computer models. And the players coming in, they know the talent that is coming in is probably greater than the talent that left. That's crazy to think of, especially when you have a Jaxson Dart at quarterback who set every record basically worth having at the University of Mississippi. But I'm here to tell you that Austin Simmons has 1-1 type potential for his game. He has a chance to be one of the most talented, greatest quarterbacks to ever suit up in the red and blue. I'm a huge fan of Austin Simmons. We will talk about that in this next segment. When you look at the S&P Plus, by the way, has them at number 9 nationally, right there by LSU again. By the way, that Ole Miss LSU game at the end of September is going to feed families, people. It's going to be a big deal. But when you look, Ole Miss at number 9 in the S&P Plus, number 13 in the FPI. Computer models and analytics love Ole Miss because of all the things I talked about before. You look at this, this is what Ole Miss should be favored in. Ole Miss should be an underdog in maybe 1, maybe 2 of their games. They are on the S&P Plus higher than LSU, but LSU is higher than Ole Miss. But Ole Miss will likely be favored by a couple points in that ball game. And they'll be favored against Florida. They'll be favored against everybody except Georgia and potentially Oklahoma. Now, we saw a year ago that can't necessarily always be gone. You can't always go by that. Listen, last season was the biggest choke in Ole Miss football history. It was. It's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's just a thing. It happened. There's no way that you can go back and retcon what went on. You lost the game at Kentucky or against Kentucky. You lost the game at Florida. You lost the game at LSU. All 3 games you should have won. Ole Miss had a 12-0 caliber team. The reason the SEC, this is my conspiracy theory take from the year ago. The reason the SEC did not have the playoff that they are accustomed to having is that the team, Ole Miss, that normally has the talent to make the noise, did not make the tournament. The Ole Miss team was historically good in 2024. It just was. But that doesn't mean this team is bad. That doesn't mean this team is going to take a step back. That doesn't mean there's no talent on this team. So we will see exactly how Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin adjust this season. One of the things is this is what we learned from the transfer portal this year. Ole Miss is loading up on tight ends and flex tight ends in the portal window. Luke Haas, Trace Bruckler, Caleb Odom, who plays on the outside at wide receiver but has a tight end body. You can do a lot of stuff with him. That kind of lets you know where their mindset is in transfer portal recruiting. Ole Miss built a whole new backfield in 2025. It's led by Logan Diggs, who is the presumptive starter, but Kewan Lacey's a dude. Damian Taylor's a dude. Shakai Mills-Knight, who's on campus. We did a video just yesterday about the running back room at Ole Miss and how that room is going to be responsible for helping Austin Simmons. And Ole Miss made tweaks on the offensive line, but it never really seemed like an emergency. I think in 2024, the problem that Ole Miss had is they got the offensive line get too big. We were in the era of size over everything when it comes to the offensive line to get push, but they didn't have the athletic ability necessary for the zone schemes that they wanted to run. So I expect them to trim up a little bit. Patrick Kutas, Bryson Sanders is going to help that offensive line out a bunch. Diego Pounds and Jaden Williams, if they can stay healthy, you got both of your tackles in place. There's not a lot of positions where Ole Miss is actually looking for people. This is why the analytics love Ole Miss. The FPI, the S&P Plus, this is the reason why they put it down there. They see what has happened at previous locations for the Ole Miss players. If that all can translate over to Ole Miss, they will be pretty good. Now, that doesn't always work. Look at the running back room last year for a little bit more information on that, but we'll see how it goes. I think Ole Miss their ceiling is through the roof and their floor is a little bit lower than last year. That's the truth about this team, and it all comes down to potential. So we'll see what happens. Some expect Ole Miss to take a step back after all of the departures, but patience, Rebel fans. There's genuine talent primed for 2025. We'll all lay it all down right after this. You know, there's nothing like the NBA playoffs, the intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their mind. It's the kind of atmosphere you must experience live, and this year's matchups are already delivering. If you want in, Game Time makes it fast and easy to get seats, even for the biggest of playoff games. Prices on the app actually drop closer to tip-off, and with killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees, Game Time is a total game changer. I was just on the app actually looking to see if there were any Ole Miss tickets at good prices, if they anywhere available, and they had any zone deals or anything like that. We'll see. Those zone deals, they offer 60% off in great sections. I love that I can see my exact view before I buy. No surprise. The app makes it ridiculously simple. 2 taps and I am done. And with the Game Time guarantee, listen to this. You know you are getting the best deal if you find a better price on the same row and section. They'll credit me 110% of the difference. How about that? Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And we always talk about the metrics and everything and Ole Miss replacing the talent coming in, but there are some people that are going to be household names by the end of September. And the first on that list is Suntarine Perkins, who is the returning leader in the Southeastern Conference for sacks. And I think tackles for loss as well. A monster on defense. And he might be the most overlooked player in all of college football leading into the season. This is a guy that has a chance to be SEC Defensive Player of the Year, an absolute monster. But yet, he's a 4th-team All-American on Phil Steele's magazine. He is somebody you don't see, they don't talk about very much. And it's because he plays a hybrid position. He plays it very well, but they don't understand it. We always talk about unknowns when it comes to physical journalists and analysts and pundits talking about teams. And there are unknowns on this Ole Miss football team. One of the unknowns that Ole Miss has is what are they going to do with Suntarine Perkins, and can he have a equal or greater year even without Princely and Monmielen or Walter Nolan or any of those guys sitting on the defensive line? That unknown kind of just drops him back. It's like, well, he's 220 pounds. I don't want to deal with him. He's small. He's Corey Moore from Virginia Tech in like 1995. That dude had 15 sacks or something like that in the season, and he was basically unblockable, but his size-speed ratio wasn't quite there. We have an epidemic in our society for pundits analyzed based on analytics at the moment, size-speed ratio, stuff like that. It is a problem. There's nothing worse than expected stats, your expected batting average, your expected goals. That is a problem, but I'll digress on that. The next player on the list is Austin Simmons. Austin Simmons is a guy that has a chance to be a 1-1 type player for Ole Miss football. One of the strongest arms you have seen at Ole Miss, probably since Chad Kelly. Somebody that can run. He's legitimately a 4-5 guy. He is 6'5", and just because he's a lefty, don't let him throw you off. His one action a year ago was against the Georgia Bulldogs after Jaxson Dart kind of hit his arm and they took him back in the locker room. Austin Simmons led Ole Miss down for a tying touchdown in a game that Ole Miss ultimately was able to win because of that drive. Last season, Austin Simmons was 19 of 32. 282 yards and 2 touchdowns. Nothing mind-numbing, but those are better numbers than Eli Manning put up as a redshirt freshman. Austin Simmons has a chance to be the dude at Ole Miss. And the reason he has a chance to be the dude at Ole Miss, everybody is going to forget this. In 2025, teams replacing quarterbacks Pretty much all the named teams are replacing their quarterbacks. Ohio State, Miami, Texas, Auburn, Oregon, Louisville, Georgia, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Indiana, Alabama, Missouri, Ole Miss, and FSU. Although FSU is kind of an addition by subtraction, but we'll all talk about that. When you look at this, that is 14 teams right off the bat where you're replacing the quarterback. So, including the two top teams supposedly in the entire country. Oregon's going to be way up the list. Georgia's way up the list. Notre Dame, Alabama. There's a lot of teams that are going to be really good that are all replacing quarterbacks. Now, I expect them to be able to do it because those teams have the ability to do that. When you look at what's going on, teams like Alabama or Ohio State's probably going to put somebody in at quarterback that's pretty good. But as I talked about, pundits hate the unknown unless it's Texas and Ohio State. Then they just kind of wave a magic wand at it and say they'll figure it out. But when you look at it, that's the reason for the separation between the analytics, the hard numbers, and what the pundits think. Phil still has Ole Miss at like 22 or 23, something like that in his college football previews. Round 18 on Athlons. We'll see about Lindy's whenever that comes in. That should come in the next week. The pundits, the people actually writing the articles, have a hard time dealing with Ole Miss because it's hard to put Ole Miss in a box because so many returning starters are gone. There's only 4. There's talent like Jam Brown is not listed as a returning starter. He's a freshman All-American. William Eccles was a midseason freshman All-American. Ole Miss on the defensive line, very, very good. And when you look at Phil Steele's preview, he loves what Ole Miss can do defensively. They think Ole Miss is on the front 7 is going to be baller. And he even ranks the secondary as them being very good as well. This defense could be pretty good. The questions relate with the unknowns on the offense. And a lot of that has to do with the running back game. Logan Diggs is the presumptive starter going into this season. He's a guy that has played for a while. He played at Notre Dame for a couple of years, played at LSU, blew out his knee in his last game, the bowl game at LSU. I think it was a Royal Quest Bowl. Had to sit out basically the whole year. He got 1 carry. You're looking at it in this picture against the Duke Blue Devils. 1 carry for 15 yards. But by all accounts, he looks really good going through the spring practices. And he needed the spring. When you're dealing with scar tissue and starting to work and break up the cobwebs and things like that, you need to be able to go out there and actually run the ball. He is a really, really good player. Another player they brought in was Kewan Lacey, who you saw all the time during spring practice of him making plays, breaking tackles, which, anytime you're dealing with spring, that's a double-edged sword. But Kewan Lacey is somebody that they recruited out of Lancaster, Texas, and they absolutely love. Kevin Smith, Lane Kiffin, the whole 9 yards, they love this player. So I'm expecting Kewan Lacey to play quite a bit. So there's your Lightning. Who's going to be your Thunder? Is it going to be Logan Diggs? Is it going to be Shakai Mills-Knight? Or is it going to be the transfer that came in from Troy in Damian Taylor, who a year ago, 173 carries, 1,010 yards, and 7 touchdowns? But remember, Rashad Amos went over 1,000 yards at Miami of Ohio before he came to Ole Miss as well. So this is at best, in my opinion, a lottery ticket. And when you look at the wide receivers at Ole Miss, Deshaun Stribling, Harrison Wallace, Caleb Odom, the newcomers coming in like Winston Watkins, Caleb Cunningham, and the returners like Caden Lee, and the tight end position of Luke Haas and Daquan Wright, you can see that pass catching wise, this Ole Miss team is absolutely loaded. But you're dealing with a lot of the unknowns because nobody knows how Austin Simmons is going to react to being the starter. And there's a lot of guys that didn't get a lot of reps as a young guy coming through there. They know Ole Miss is going to be good on defense. They have that under control. The unknown on offense is just a little bit too much to bear for them. And there's going to be some guys that become household names very, very early in the season about what they can do. I'm excited. I think Austin Simmons, by the second or third game, either the Kentucky game or the Arkansas game, will be a guy that everybody in the Southeastern Conference is paying attention to because he's just doing incredible things. We'll see. It all depends on things like running game, things like offensive line, wide receivers catching the ball. If all that happens, the offense is going to fall into place because Lane Kiffin, you can usually count on the offense. They are usually pretty good. So if they can be just consistent and just be what they've been with the defense being at the level they're going to be at, this is a potential playoff level team. It just is. Anyway, when we come back in our final segment, Ole Miss has sold out season tickets yet again. But what does that mean for the long distance fans this fall? We'll break down all the options next. Ole Miss sold out their season tickets yet again, this time in June. I mean, it is June 9th or something like that. It was the date that they sold out season tickets, which is awesome. That shows the demand. And with them upping tailgating in the Grove and updating parking and all that, we'll see during the football season how that has changed. But as far as tickets to the actual ball game, the Ole Miss fans absolutely stepped up. Ole Miss is now, if you're a student, do not freak out because they have not begun selling student tickets yet. So the student ticket sales will go on sale in August, just like they always have. Students are going to sell out. Students are going to show up. Nothing but respect for them. But the other 55,000 seats in the stadium, those are sold out. And I talked to Walker Jones earlier on in the week. Good friend of the podcast, Walker Jones. And we talked about how in this age of the house settlement, Ole Miss football is becoming more and more Oxford-centric. It just is. You even talked to Walker Jones, them trying to want to get the Grove Collective to get more businesses in and around the Oxford area. I'm sure everybody else is welcome as well, but that's just the way that works out. It's kind of like recruiting used to be. We used to talk about the 4-hour halo around a university campus. That was kind of the home recruiting territory for a team. Well, this is kind of like that in this age of revenue sharing and the house settlement and all of that. We talked to Walker Jones and said, what about somebody from Gulfport that has trouble going to Oxford for an 11 o'clock game? What about those fans? What are we doing for them? They can't make it to a football game, so they are forced to watch it on television. How do you monetize, for lack of a better word, that group of fans? How do you monetize the fan in Pensacola, Florida, or Winter Haven, Florida, or Atlanta, Georgia, or Nashville, Tennessee, that just can't make it to a ball game from time to time? How do you activate those? And I actually brought it up. You can go back on the show Monday night with Walker Jones. I directly asked him about it. What about watch parties? How do we figure out how to monetize and activate watch parties in the Ole Miss fan base? Ole Miss is in a really good position to handle the rev share, the TV contract and all that. The 20.5 is going to be taken care of, and people in and around Oxford, Mississippi, you can tell they're showing up to see a winning program. Ole Miss has won 10 games 3 out of the last 4 years. But what about the fans in Pascagoula that have a difficult time making it for an 11 o'clock kickoff? They have their wife, they have a couple of kids. It's just hard. What about that group of fans? That thing will be the question that Ole Miss deals with in the near future. Listen, Walker Jones mentioned on the podcast that Ole Miss fans work better when they're working together. They're pulling the rope the same direction. And you have the group around Oxford. If you want to go see a game, go see a game. But I think watch parties might be the future. And Walker Jones mentioned a couple of times his relationship with alumni associations in areas. And I think it would be really neat if we could set it up to where an Ole Miss watch party is happening and it becomes a regular occurrence to where these satellite groves pop up all over the country. I think that would be very neat. And I also think it would be neat for the fans that for years have been left behind for what they're doing. Now in the age of the collective has a way to do something a little bit different to help out Ole Miss football, and just as important, maybe more important, because the people that are spending all the money to go to the games, that's going to hit the maximum of $20.5 million. But what about the extra money? That's going to have to be raised from somewhere. It's likely going to come from businesses, if we're going to be honest. But the regular fan that can't make it to ball games, they have a chance to affect winning at a level that they haven't before. Ole Miss selling out of season tickets in June, that's awesome. That's an amazing thing. And people going to the games, it's going to be a great atmosphere. What has been built in Oxford, Mississippi is absolutely unreal. But the next step is, what about the fans that got left behind? No matter what you do, people get left behind. So when figuring out how to monetize them, activate them, that is the next step for the collective and Ole Miss fandom as well. So a couple more days set in the palatial Central Florida studios before we move to the super palatial Central Florida studios. We'll set that up over the weekend. So hopefully next Monday, it'll look a little bit different as well. We'll see how the background works. It'll be a set that's about 2 to 3 times larger than I'm in right now, and it should be pretty cool. We're gonna start doing that on Friday and start working over the weekend. So Monday's show will be the first time you kind of get to see what's going on. Although it may not be a finished product, there's always tweaking that goes on the sets and things like that. If you followed me for any extended period of time, you know that. But we have a chance to start on Friday and at least have it from that location on Monday. Thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves in offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the front door of Ole Miss. Anybody interested in Ole Miss, we are generally their first stop when it comes to Ole Miss sports. Your support means the world to us. For your second listen, check out The Portal Show. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan in the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find The Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Hotty toddy, everyone. And remember, analytics is just the old English word that means bad football. We'll see you tomorrow.